Friends, it is Friday. It is a special Coffee with Contrarians because it seems like after 9 p.m. Eastern Time yesterday, all hell broke loose in the world. We have had the most extraordinary week in American presidential constitutional history, and we are going to get to that. But first, we have exactly the right person, Stephen Cook from the Council on Foreign Relations, to talk to us about the other enormous news. And this was this massive strike by Israel on Iran in the wee hours of the morning, their time, that took out command chiefs across the board in Iran, that hit certain nuclear sites, really an extraordinary breadth of which we have not yet seen before. And we're going to talk about how extensive it is, why now, and what this says about Israel and Trump's, frankly, influence in the world as a whole. So you came to the right place. As always, we're going to get you caught up. And we thought all these events were critical enough to hold a special Coffee with Contrarians. So, Steve, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Jen.
First of all, how different in magnitude is this from previous Israeli strikes on Iran?
Huge. There's no other way to describe it. The Israelis are engaged in a broad effort to disable Iran's ability to, one, produce nuclear weapons, two, retaliate against Israel. This operation, which included Mossad agents building a drone base within Iran and actually shipping in vehicles with weapons on them to make sure that Iran could not launch on Israel in retaliation, as well as you noted, attacks on senior leadership of the Islamic Republic, which suggests that there are military goals here and there are political goals. And I just dropped a piece at Foreign Policy essentially arguing that this is kind of regime change.
Yes, it really is. Now, the Israelis have said that this was preemptive. Preemptive has a very special meaning, particularly in Israeli history. Preemptive was the Six-Day War, when the Arab troops were on the verge of striking. Do we have any evidence of that at all? And if so, what is this and why now?
Yeah, I mean, we had this debate during the U.S. invasion of Iraq, which the George W. Bush administration called preemptive as well. And I think it's preemptive in the sense that the Israelis had a red line and said, if the Iranians cross it, that means they're clearly weaponizing their nuclear program. And they perceived that. And that's why they're calling it preemptive. But I think sitting 6,000 miles away and having some perspective on this, I think it's pretty clear it was a preventive strike. I don't think the Iranians were closer to weaponizing than people, I think, realized. But it wasn't like they had the ability to mount this weapon on a missile and were about to attack Israel. And that's the problem with these terms. It's kind of in the eye of the beholder. What's preemptive? You talk to every Israeli, they'll say, oh, no, this was a preemptive strike. You talk to people elsewhere, they say, well, I'm not so sure about that.
Right. Now, the first round of response was about 100 drones that were launched. According to people I've talked to in Israel very late last night, it didn't seem to have gone in. It seems to be a kind of weak response. Is that indicative of the damage that Israel has already done, or should we expect a much, much bigger response?
Well, based on the early reports, Iran only has about 100 missile launchers, and the Israelis have done damage to them. So that even if Iran has huge numbers of ballistic missiles, which we know they do, they cannot now fire them because they no longer have the launchers. The drones are slow and easy for Israel and its regional partners to shoot them down. And we know that the Jordanian Air Force has been out and conducting operations. So I think that, the public condemnations that are coming from the region are obscuring the fact that because Israel is part of CENTCOM, all of the members of CENTCOM are joining in the defense against Iran's attempted drone strikes on Israel. But as far as I know, speaking to Israelis all morning, there has been no damage. There's been no attacks on Israel's soil. Is something bigger coming? Right now, the Israelis have lowered their alert level, so they don't think that they're going to be they're going to have to deal with a major ballistic missile strike like they did last fall.
Right. Of course, we're now joined by Norm Eisen, who's going to bring us up to date on all of the domestic news. Last question for Steve, and then we have to let him go because, as you imagine, he's a little bit busy this morning. Steve, what does this say about Donald Trump? During the JCPOA negotiations that Israel was very much opposed to, they didn't strike while Obama was negotiating that. Trump has said he was going to end the Ukraine war on day one. He was going to bring peace in Iran. He was going to end the Gaza war. Is he irrelevant?
Well, if you believe what the administration was saying in the run up to the Israeli strikes, which is that we are committed to negotiations, we want an agreement, then yes, he is. Now, as the morning has gone on, as he speaks to journalists, whether it's CNN or ABC News' John Carl, he has sort of leaned into the idea that this was all a grand deception and he was in on it and this was his plan all along.
Yeah, right, yeah.
So I'm leaning more towards he couldn't get the Ukraine war over. He couldn't get a ceasefire in Gaza, and the Israelis perceived a threat, and they've always promised if the Iranians crossed that threshold, they were going to go regardless of what a president said.
And by the way, no one gave that script to Marco Rubio, who through the White House last night said, wasn't us, not us.
Right.
We didn't have anything to do with it. But we are going to absolutely stay on top of this. Steve, thank you so much for hopping on.
Thanks for having me.
Notice. We're going to continue to follow you, continue to follow developments, and we will see you next time. Thanks so much.
Great. Thanks. Take care. Bye-bye.
You're very, very welcome. Norm, what a week. What a day. We're going to see if one of our friends can be joining us. But in the meantime, let's talk for a moment about our dear friend and a United States Senator, Alex Padilla, who was manhandled, who was thrown to the ground, who was cuffed for asking a question at a press conference. I have never seen anything like this in my lifetime. And here we are joined by the great Mike Zamor from the ACLU, also the perfect person to talk to us about manhandling, cuffing a United States senator. Norm, this is fascism. This is the dictator's playbook, shutting down free speech with violence.
Jen, we've seen a series of these almost metaphors for what Donald Trump is doing to the Constitution, because Senator Padilla represents the first branch under the Constitution, Article 1,
Yes.
the Congress. And to see him, the video so shocking, simply for daring to question Article 2, the executive, a sitting United States senator, assaulted, pushed, roughed up. Then the end of the tape is, and he says, I'm a United States senator. He was lawfully in the building visiting with senior military. And then the end of the tape, forced to the ground, face down, handcuffed. That's what the Trump administration is doing to Article 1. Unlike Senator Padilla, the MAGA caucus in Congress is not speaking out about it. And it's what they're doing to the Constitution and the First Amendment, which Senator Padilla was exercising his First Amendment rights. In the United States of America, press conferences are for asking questions, not distributing propaganda.
Exactly.
So it was a shocking moment and terrible.
Mike, what we saw there with them manhandling someone exercising First Amendment rights, if, as Senator Padilla said, if they would do that to a sitting senator We now understand what they are doing in the country writ large and specifically in Los Angeles. It is atrocious that a United States senator should be treated this way. But Americans all over the country are being treated this way simply for exercising their First Amendment rights. Talk to us about whether you think this is a wake up call and whether this will frankly help Americans understand that this administration is not tamping down on violence, they're tamping down on the First Amendment.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And I mean, if you think about the things that we're seeing, not just this week, but over the sweep of the last several months, and you think about, imagine these headlines coming from abroad: regime sends in troops to silence protesters, regime exiles people to foreign torture prison without trial or evidence, regime investigates president's critics, regime arrests opposition lawmaker. I mean, these are the kinds of things that are intended to silence the opposition and force compliance with the wishes of the regime. And that's not the way democracy is supposed to work. And it's certainly not the way the First Amendment works. I think when you ask if this is a turning point, I think it's noteworthy that on Saturday, tomorrow, we've got 2,000 No Kings rallies being scheduled across the country.
Yes.
There's over 500,000 people have RSVP'd to these, and the thing that I think is so interesting and energizing is that since the National Guard got federalized over the objections of the governor in California, the number of rallies scheduled jumped from about 30%. So
Yes.
if the goal is to shut people up and say, "Hey, fall in the line," I think that's not working.
I absolutely agree with that. And I think one of the things that we are beginning to see is that this narrative that Trump only reacted to violence, to a rebellion, to an invasion has fallen apart. And of course, Norm, yesterday, the state of California went before Judge Breyer in the district court, presented all sorts of evidence that this was a minor disturbance. It, first of all, in no way met the standards of the statute, Title 10, 12406, no rebellion, no invasion, no inability to execute the laws, and they had not acted through the governor. That argument completely won the day. The government has appealed to the Ninth Circuit, which has issued what they call an administrative stay, meaning just hold on. We're going to hear this more fully on Tuesday. First question. Were you surprised by the ruling? And secondly, do you think that it will hold up on appeal? And in particular, the court's willingness to borrow from the Alien Enemies Act decisions, which the courts have said, no, Mr. President, this is justiciable. The courts do get to decide whether the statute has been met. Tell us how you think that's going to evolve and what your impression was of really this most sweeping decision, which went, frankly, beyond what I thought the judge was going to do.
The lower court was certainly correct. Just like in the Alien Enemies Act, where there's no invasion, that there's no rebellion here. I mean, that's talking about things like the rebellion of the southern states, to say that vastly, overwhelmingly peaceful protests with a few isolated incidents by irresponsible knuckleheads constitute a rebellion. That's 1984 style reasoning, and the judge dismissed it. So I believe that Judge Breyer was
We're losing you a little bit, Norm.
correct.
Norm, let's go back.
We'll see what happens now. An administrative appeal doesn't signal what the Ninth Circuit panel will do. Supreme Court get involved.
Norm is.
I think the opinion is correct.
Yeah, and I can I just add that I
Norm
think
is
that
breaking up on us. So,
yeah.
right, Mike, why don't you take the ball from there? So, do you think this is going to hold up on appeal?
I am not in the prognostication business, but what I'll say is that I agree that um, the logic that came out of the cases that our team has argued in these Alien Enemy Act cases is I think commonsensical, right? Which is that if the president, who is a shameless liar and will say whatever he wants, and has assembled a team around him to do the same, if they can just like invoke some magic words and then just like wipe away
Yeah,
constitutional protections like the due process clause, or sweep away statutes like Title 10, and just take over the military, the National Guard of California, then as Judge Breyer suggested, like, that's not the rule of law. That is not democracy. Like, then we're like veering into some kind of authoritarian monarchy, which is exactly what the Constitution was
e-
designed to protect against.
exactly. Norm, we lost you a little bit on the bad connection. Let me try one more time. We have had a whole set of litigation that you've been very helpful and very involved in, thanks to you contrarians, that has dealt with our tripart system of government. That the president does not get to wipe out Article 1 on things like holding up spending, on things like eliminating entire agencies, on transmission of private information. There's those cases which are incredibly important, but both the Alien and Enemies Act and this go to a whole nother level. We are now litigating about whether we have a police state. Can you underscore for us how critical these sorts of cases are? This is about giving untrammeled police and military power to the President of the United States.
Nothing could be more serious than what we have here, Jen, because the president is running roughshod over statutory and constitutional protections. That's why Judge Breyer's opinion was such a landmark. That's why it was correct for Governor Newsom to litigate it. And contrarians, you were there in court because we represented the city of Los Angeles filing a brief supporting the governor. So you are not only tracking what's going on in our democracy, you're a part of fighting for it.
Absolutely. And Norm is too modest to say, but he filed a with Democracy Defenders an amicus brief on behalf of the city of Los Angeles. And the other thing we saw, Mike, is that there were military men who generals, admirals, retired National Guard officials who have filed amicus brief saying this is dangerous from the military's perspective. Talk to us a little bit about why we shouldn't be mixing military and civilian law enforcement, and why it's so extraordinary that you have retired military men and women weighing in on this.
Yeah, this is a huge danger to the readiness of our troops and their ability to carry out their mission. So,
Yeah.
I worked for many years for a senator from Oregon. Wildfires out in the West are a huge, huge and growing problem, and the National Guard plays an integral role in helping fight those fires. When hurricanes strike the Southeast, the National Guard is on the ground to try to make sure that people have access to water and gasoline for generators and all those things. The National Guard are really important in the fabric of our communities and our states in
Yes.
moments of crisis. And if they're being pulled away for, a propaganda show of strength on behalf of the regime, they're not able to do their job. Similarly, in our very polarized society, the armed services, the active duty armed services, are one of the few institutions that has generally maintained its level of support and confidence of the
Yeah.
public, and that's important, right? And if they start looking like they are tools of whoever is in the Oval Office at the moment, and that they are being wielded against the people as opposed to on behalf of defending our country, that's going to shatter the confidence and trust in the military, just as we have seen the politicization of the Supreme Court, for example, shatter the confidence in that institution. So I think from the perspective of those who care about,
Right.
and I'm not, I don't come from that background, but I think for the people who do have a really long-term investment in the integrity of the military as an institution, this is really alarming and should be.
Absolutely. Norm, I want to mention that one of our viewers is tuning in, calling in from Naples, Italy. That's the extent of our audience. And the rest of the world should be concerned because we are the foundation of the free world. And as we go the way of a police state, this has huge ramifications for the rest of the world. I would also point to the contrarian who put into the chat that Senator Padilla is following in the footsteps of John Lewis. How right is that? We have to be able to exercise our rights because tyrants, Norm, depend upon us being cowed. Someone said, calling into the great April Ryan show the other day, they can't lock up 330 million people. Talk to us as we reach the end of our time about the importance of No King's Day and peaceful protest in the face of these atrocious oversteps and really tyrannical behavior of the Trump regime.
Well, the ultimate safeguard of democracy is the people, and millions of them are going to be turning out to not oppose, but to support our Constitution, to support the idea that we have ended monarchy in this country centuries ago. It reminds me of, speaking of John Lewis, during the impeachment, he took me aside. He said, Norm, impeach Donald Trump, but do it with love. That is what inspires No King's Day. It's an opportunity for millions of our fellow Americans to say, hey, whatever Donald Trump may do, when he crosses the line, violates the Constitution, violates American values, he no longer speaks for us. He's behaving like a king. We reject that. So, very important day in modern American history, friends. You can go to www.nokings.org to find a location near you. And Jen Rubin will have coverage here at the Contrary, and you should say a word about that.
Absolutely. I will just say that what separates the great sainted, really, John Lewis from the rest of us is I wanted to impeach him with a big grudge and chip on my shoulder, not with love. But that's just me, folks. That's the Jen Rubin that you get. Not so magnanimous, but that's why we need the John Lewises. Yes, we are going to have fabulous coverage on Saturday from 6 to 8. April Ryan and I are going to be co-hosting. We are going to have the most amazing lineup. We're going to have Heather Cox Richardson. We're going to have Dan Pfeiffer. We're going to have Congressman Raskin. We're going to have an entire slate of remarkable people, organizers, the head of Indivisible. We are going to blow the socks off all of you. We're going to have live coverage, not of the stupid parade. And by the way, it might get rained out. He shouldn't have fired all of those weather people because they would have told him it thunderstorms in DC in the summertime in the afternoons. But be that as it may, he's going to find out science really is important. We are going to have live coverage, not of that. We're going to have live coverage of the rest of it because we are America. We are the American spirit. And I asked Congressman Raskin the other day, do you believe that we still have the spirit of democracy? And he said, yes, I see it everywhere. And I think we can all say that we are relying on you because you are our final backstop. If we allow ourselves to be cowed, if we allow Senator Padilla to be roughed up with no consequence, if we allow these Republicans to hide under their desks in such a shameful fashion, aiding and abetting a tyrannical regime, then shame on us. But I think we're better than that. So, Norm, thank you for joining us. Friends, the reason we had a little bit of transmission problem with Norm is he's joining us from Prague. Norm is such a devoted fan of all of you and such a devoted patriot. He would call in from Prague. So thank you for making that effort. And Mike Zamore, with about 3 minutes notice, dropped on as well. So thank you, both of you. The perfect people to have on. And Contrarians, we cannot thank you enough. We cannot do this work without you. So if you haven't already, upgrade your subscription. We need you to be a paid subscriber that helps Norm in court litigate, that pays for things like that brief on behalf of the city of Los Angeles. And it also helps us bring coverage like you're going to see tomorrow. So thank you all. We wish you a great, peaceful day. Thank you, both Norm and Mike. And keep the faith, guys. Thanks so much. Thanks, Contrarians. Bye-bye.